Yeah, I mean, so let's get into athletic talk. Maybe some background on the search for the athletic director and what you were looking for that led to Chance Miller being named the VP for intercollegiate athletics, and maybe also I know current or former AD Matt Hogue, who's also been on the podcast. I believe I read he's opening up a kind of a venture on campus too. So maybe just talk about this whole process, because I think it did surprise some people. I wasn't surprised with the hire. I don't know that anybody is. I mean, it made total sense. He'd been at South Carolina for a decade and in the state. I think that's huge. And we know Coastal Carolina actually was spun out of kind of USC and its history, right? So I wasn't surprised about that. But maybe just what led to the change and then the transition and how you went about the process.
Well, when I first got here, Matt Hogue and I had talked about kind of his career trajectory and where he wanted to end up. And he told me he had this idea of starting a kind of media center based on what is arguably probably the best one in the country, and that's at Syracuse, the Newhouse School, where you from filming, production, writing copy, interviewing, doing everything. That was kind of something he wanted to launch here at Coastal. So the timing was propitious. It was right. And he had just finished or was finishing his chairmanship of the baseball committee. And so as we made that transition and we decided that the time was good and we wanted to kind of cast a broad net, but also do it as expeditiously as possible. When the news came out, Travis, I got called by probably 10 different search firms within 10 hours. And I know, I get it. I've been through searches before. But relying on Coach Moglia, Joe Moglia, who's the former CEO of TD Ameritrade, and not every university president has a Fortune 500 retired CEO right here on campus, but we have that advantage with Coach Moglia. He had developed a relationship with Mike Alden, and Mike has been fantastic. I didn't know him. I knew of him. 17 years as the athletic director at Missouri. So I've now learned that everybody knows Mike Alden. And we decided that we would just keep it kind of a 3-person endeavor at first, and then we broadened it to 5 people that served on a serving committee, on a screening committee. Chair of our faculty senate, our FAR, beg your pardon, our senior women's administrator, a donor, a student athlete, and it was chaired by our head of HR. And that screening committee, when we put out the posting, we got nearly 50 applications in pretty short order, and they culled that down to 16, down to 8 that they wanted to interview on Zoom, and then we brought 3 finalists to campus, and we did it very quietly. It was all done kind of sotto voce, as they say, and we kept the identities confidential of all of our candidates because we knew we didn't want to jeopardize those, particularly that were sitting athletic directors. And I would argue that it was, at the time, probably one of the most appealing athletic director positions in the country. And Mike Alden told us so much. He said he had tens and tens and tens of conversations with people gauging their interest, but if they weren't interested, do they know somebody that might be? And we all kind of gravitated toward Chants. As you said, prior to his time, Travis, with South Carolina, he was with the NCAA in compliance. And prior to that, he practiced law in New York. He's got a law degree and brings so much to this position. And as I joked to the press conference, we really hired him because of his wife, Lauren, and their 2 kids. They're the coolest kids I've ever met. Kason's 8 and Kayla's 6, and they are all in with Coastal. And we're really excited to see what Chance can do with our department.
Yeah, I think you knocked it out of the park there, and I'm excited about what they're going to be doing. And it really was one of the more attractive openings. I mean, the facilities you all have, you've got a beautiful campus, a beautiful location. There really wasn't. I mean, football obviously had kind of jumped, got everyone on the map a couple years ago, but that's been sustained. Mm-hmm. And with the future of college athletics, I mean, I think you're in the perfect spot right now of what you could have been. And you're also making some other changes too. And I kind of want to talk about this next. Is you all have, it's called a convocation center. Most people in athletics will call it an arena. It's same. But you all also announced that you're going to be opening a new convocation center. So can you kind of maybe talk about just introduce that idea. When did the idea of a new arena begin? And then maybe share some ideas of usage and kind of the timeline as well.
So prior to our conversation today, I was on with our faculty senate. They meet virtually in July, and a lot of questions about the Convocation Center. Also, the advantage that we have in our county. When you came to visit, Travis, every dollar that you spent, a penny of every dollar went into a fund, 80% of which goes to pay for all of the K-12 facilities in our county. 13.5% comes to us. The remainder, 6.5%, goes to our technical college, which is right next door. So we have a huge advantage that we can pay for infrastructure without bonding, without raising private dollars. We can raise dollars for other purposes, without using institutional reserves. And so we have probably a 3 to 5 year plan based on the receipts from the penny sales tax. What can we count on annually to either borrow against that revenue stream or to pay with cash? So we had the idea that there's nothing in our county that has 8,000 seats that can accommodate high school graduations, high school basketball tournaments, maybe an ESPN event, maybe a regional or not a regional, but maybe a conference championship game here in our county, and that can be used by our sister school just to our east, the technical college, for their graduation. So we're selling it as a gathering spot for our community that, oh, by the way, it also doubles as a basketball and volleyball arena for our men's and women's teams. So they will maintain their current space over in the HTC Center, but our hope is to break ground on this in 2026 and have it right on the corner. As you came off of 501, remember, if you don't pay attention as you're going up a state highway, you may drive right by our campus. Now we're going to use this as our anchor on that north side to really exclaim, here you are, you're at Coastal Carolina University.
Yeah, so you had taken me into to the center where your basketball teams, and you said you're going to keep that basketball and volleyball to practice. And to be honest, it really looked more fitting for a practice facility of like what a school like yours would expect. So kind of taking that next level to the new Convocation Center. IU Indianapolis, formerly IUPUI, also just announced plans, and I had known about that one for a while just from my previous roles, but I'm very excited for them to get it too, because you do need that for a campus space. I mean, you could have to sing graduation inside on a hot day. All of a sudden, you can't be at the stadium or wherever you do it outside, and just I know how big of a community person you are. I believe you used to go into, maybe still do, into high schools and speak to students there as well. So I mean, that'd be another way to get the community and all the schools in the county to come in. So I wasn't really surprised that you all had the vision for that. Can you maybe talk about the steps of approval for a project like that? You talked about the funding and how you're going to do it, but what all, like, I like to just think about the details of people that aren't used to this. Is it the same as an academic building, for one? I know the funding source might change this, but I mean, you still have to get approved by various places, right?
Yeah. And as I like to say, we love the pace of life in South Carolina. People kind of have a different kind of cadence and pace to how they live and walk and behave. But sometimes that seeps into government and it slows down things just maddeningly slow. But still in all, we have to work with our local delegation when we go up to Columbia, which is our state capital. We have to get approvals from, of course, our various 2 or 3 different committees, but it all starts with our trustees. The trustees have to approve it. And then the permitting process here, we're surrounded by wetlands. And so the Army Corps of Engineers has to get involved in a lot of the mitigation for some of that wetlands. And, we're moving University Boulevard. It's probably a stretch of maybe a quarter mile. And that's probably about an $8 million project because of all the wetland studies and the mitigation we have to do. If you come to South Carolina, you'll see retention ponds everywhere because of the water and the flood overflow. And when the Waccamaw River behind kind of swells during a hurricane, the water has nowhere to go. So they build these ponds everywhere. So as a result, you have to factor in all of these things to build the facility. And that can really slow down the process. The last thing I'll add is a lot of our campus is owned by the Coastal Educational Foundation, which was the 501c3 established before the university was officially established. So they own a lot of our property. So if we want to do a new facility, we have to first own the property, and that entails getting an appraisal on the property, a fair market value, and then in many ways paying the foundation for us to have that land deeded to us. So it's a multi-step process in South Carolina, but we're so fortunate again to have the penny sales tax that helps pay for all that. By the way, the penny sales tax was just renewed for another 15 years by 68% of the vote in our county. Wow. So it's in place until 2039.
68% sounds high.
It's really high. And when you think about all the people that have moved here, you know, if I pull out the ballot and there's a referendum and I see a new tax or renewal of a tax, you know, my first reaction might be, hey, I don't want another tax. But we did a really concerted, we couldn't pay for it because we didn't want to, you know, blur the lines. We had another entity that was paid for by outside supporters and donors that made a case for, look, either you can support this, or the property tax that you're going to pay that's going to go to K-12 buildings is going to go up exponentially. And people appreciated that. So why not let the good folks of Indiana and West Virginia and North Carolina help pay for our buildings when they come and visit? So I'm really happy it was renewed.
Well, as a school board member and someone that works at a college with young children, I'm very happy that my tank of gas and my lunch that day helped your K-12 schools and your university. So
we thank you, Travis.
You are welcome, President Benson. So, you know, kind of speaking about government regulations, kind of going back to a question about everything going on with college athletics right now. You were in the midst of a transition. Obviously, yours is more unique because your current athletic director wasn't leaving the campus and Chants coming in. So how do you actively monitor everything that's going on with the NCAA and college athletics right now as a university president? Because I know you're also involved in your conference leadership as a president, but maybe just how you've really spent the last year plus navigating things.
Well, every day is a new kind of news flash, breaking news from the D1 ticker. I've been reading the D1 ticker ever since I met Matt Roberts at the Final Four years and years ago. And they do a great job kind of collating all that information. That's one of the first things I read every morning. But we also have, you know, for example, our state kind of state government rep that handles all of our lobbying, a guy named Brant Branham. He was actively involved in working with both Clemson and USC. And Chance is one of the people that helped draft that NIL bill that was signed into law by our governor just a few weeks ago. So every day there's a new development. We have a collective. We have two collectives associated with the campus. Who knows that they may be given the green light to be housed on campus in the next while. Then NIL stuff, the house settlement, all these things lead to this kind of persistent change that every single day you never know if you're going to wake up and find out if something else has changed. You know, the cannabis ruling that just came out, you know, multi-transfer, the transfer portal. I mean, the fact that you can go all over the place. You know, one of our best pitchers, a kid named Liam Doyle, was a closer for us 2 years ago, goes to Ole Miss last year, announced today that he's going to Tennessee. So, you know, I don't know how coaches do it with roster management, quite frankly. And, you know, I'm not one to pile on coaches when they're always complaining about how busy they are and how they can't stay on top of things and how many hours they work. Their jobs are made exponentially more difficult with trying to convince a young man or woman to come to your campus because it's a better deal. You know, unfortunately, education is not really focused on as much as it used to be. And I certainly focus on it, but there's so many other kind of collateral things that are in the equation now for students as they decide where they're going to go. So I just try and keep my head above water, Travis. That's what I'm trying to do.
That's all you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. This was off script, but I was kind of thinking, going back to your AD change and the process. A lot of people that listen to this podcast or watch it are obviously hopeful athletic directors. Hopefully some sitting ADs do. They get a lot of content from D1 Ticker. You mentioned Matt Roberts. I did have a short stint working with them. They produce great content, but I think my focus is more what can I tactically, less news and more about preparation. So what advice would you give prospective ADs to prepare for or even consider a job opening? because you mentioned you had tons of search firms calling you right away, and then you had 50 plus applicants. I personally think that, there's the dossier. You can do your own research. You can do the D1 ticker has a dossier that you can do. I've looked at one. It is very good information. But I do think people need to understand institutional fit a little bit better, or at least geography. What's going on in the background. I would even suggest reading a history book of the institution. If most schools have them, as you know. But what would your advice be for prospective athletic directors when they're kind of trying to figure that out?
Well, you touched on many of them there. I mean, you made recommendations that I would wholeheartedly endorse. I think you have to understand that, in this day and age, if you want to get into the business, you're going to have many of the same kind of tickets punched, as it were. Have you kind of had increased responsibility? Do you have a master's degree? Tell me about the different aspects that you worked within an athletic department. A lot of people have those same things. It is all about the institutional fit. And you understand the kind of the endemic challenges that a campus may face that are unique to that campus. Do you understand the history of the place? Coming into Coastal, unless I understood what those people did in 1954 to kind of put money on the table and say, we want an institution of higher education in our county. We're not sure how to do it. And it was kind of fledgling there for a little while. Then it became a branch of USC until 1993. We've only been independent for a pretty short period of time. So if you go into an interview, you better know your history of the place, understand who the players are, understand the unique challenges they may face, but also come up with a plan. I understand your history of how you did this or why you did this, but this is what I would do moving forward, kind of constantly in the back of my mind. That perspective helps inform what I want to do moving forward. So I was always impressed with candidates, whether it's for an academic position on campus, a dean, a vice president, or through this AD search. Those that have done their homework. They knew what our student head count was. They knew what our athletic budget was. They knew what our kind of our NIL operation was like. They understood kind of our facility needs. They understood kind of ticket sales and how they would promote sports differently. So you can never be too prepared. My mom used to say proper preparation prevents poor performance. I saw it through this process of some that really came loaded for bear. They really had boned up. Others that not quite as much. And I asked every single candidate, scale of 1 to 10, how bad do you want this job? And I won't tell you the responses, but the ones that were pretty energetic and told me that out of 10 it was a 12. Those are the people I really paid attention to.
Yeah, and I think there were, I don't know if it was Dwayne Peavy at DePaul. One AD during COVID had told me they started during COVID and said that they basically still had to go see the campus. They went out of their way to go visit the campus quietly, even before they knew they were going to interview, because they wanted to be able to speak intelligently about the place. If they were fortunate, because every interview then was Zoom, and so was able to do that. And then the book historian thing, I picked up. So I'm an IU Indianapolis alum for undergrad, and so I gave Luke Basso, the new athletic director. Well, he's been there over a year now, but when I left the president's office at IU, I went over and talked to him and just introduced myself as I was leaving, and I gave him that book. And then I interviewed him a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and that book was there, and it was in a different spot that looked like it had been read, because it was the history of IUPUI was basically built around the exact same time as Coastal. And so you just be able to see, it's always going to be one-sided, right? Like, you're not going to get the bad part of history if your university created it, but people can get a lot out of that if they know the history of the place whenever they go talk to faculty and things like that. So that's good advice. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're landing the plane now. We got to talk about some serious things. So the NCAA football game. Will President Benson be purchasing the game? I know you have boys, so they might. And how long will it take you to get the Chants to the CFP in Dynasty mode?
So I do. I have 5 children, 3 boys, 2 girls. The 2 boys that are still at home are very, very loyal and committed gamers. So if it's not FIFA or whatever they're playing, they cannot wait till this game. And they have been paying very close attention to the color. Do they get the field right? All the graphics, all that sort of thing. and they're pumped. So I probably won't be playing it, but I will certainly monitor what my boys are doing.
How are you not going to play it? They gotta get Dad on there at some point.
No, I just have never been. I like I said, I just rediscovered my love of reading stuff that's not related to my job, because everything is really focused on that. But while they're gaming, I'm reading, Travis.
What do you think the NCAA football video game can do for a marketability of a campus, though? Because ever since it became popular to play the game if you get your hands on old copy. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I started my doctoral program, and I think Matt Brown from Extra Points, he puts so much stuff out about higher education and college athletics, especially this video game. But just being on that game, there was a big talk about who's all going to be in it. I mean, if you're you got a busy competition for those eyeballs in South Carolina, for example, I mean, what's it mean for a university to actually even be on a video game that a bunch of teenagers are going to be playing?
Yeah. By the way, Matt came to campus last summer. So you started the trend here. I'm just waiting for Dan Wetzel and Pat Forty to come and pay a visit. By the way, I listen to the College Football Inquirer religiously. That's another one of my favorite podcasts. I was paying close attention to all the schools that were saying, we're in the game. And my kids were so excited when they said, Dad, have you seen the images of in the kind of trailer and the entrances and all that sort of thing? So it is a very crowded field here, but there are only 3 schools in the state, over 5 million residents. They're projecting another 1 million people will live in South Carolina by 2042. And there are only 3 schools that play FBS football: USC, Clemson, Coastal. So we are now in that kind of upper echelon, if you will, that we're part of the conversation about NIL, about scheduling, about rivalries and how we can cooperate in the state. And that's really important for us. And I have to tell you too, Travis, I think Coastal has a little bit of cachet with its name now. The teal field, the cool logo, the mullet run that we had in 2020, where we had that magical run. I was named in October of 2020 and started January the following year, and that was really cool. I mean, to be on national television when the Big Ten shut down and to host BYU, my alma mater here, and to beat them was really, really that was very memorable.
And just the way that it was actually that week, people remember how it came out of nowhere. It's not one of those things you scheduled 3 years earlier.
Exactly. So anything that can get to that population that is playing the game and they can see and they can immediately identify because they're schools that they're cheering for. And, from what I gather, the graphics are really cool and they're very true. And I can't wait to see my kids playing it.
Well, Michael Benson, president of Coastal Carolina University, thanks so much for being on Higher Ed Athletics again.
My pleasure, Travis. And we say here, Chants up.
That's right.